I never thought I'd be scared of an upstairs neighbor. I moved to Spokane last fall to start a new job at a design firm. The apartment I landed was in an older but charming brick building, a 3-story walk-up just outside downtown. The rent was manageable, the place was clean, and it was only a 15-minute commute. The only thing I didn't like was how thin the walls and ceilings were. I could hear everything. My upstairs neighbor was an older man named Bill. The landlord told me he'd been living there for over a decade and kept to himself. That seemed to be true. I rarely saw him, but I often heard him. Footsteps late at night, the floor creaking overhead, sometimes even mumbling or what sounded like hushed conversations. I figured the guy was just eccentric or lonely. It wasn't my business. The first weird thing happened during my second week. I was in bed reading when I heard knocking above me. Not accidental banging or something falling. No, this was deliberate, spaced knocking. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more, and again. It lasted maybe 5 minutes and then stopped completely. The next morning, I ran into Bill at the mailboxes. I figured I'd introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Sam. Just moved in downstairs." He didn't smile, didn't even nod, just stared at me and muttered, "You shouldn't listen too closely at night." Then he turned and walked upstairs. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was joking. Maybe he had dementia or something. But it stuck with me. After that, I paid more attention. The knocks came back every few nights, always at the exact same time, 3:17 a.m. I checked the clock obsessively. Always 3:17. I started recording the sound. I played it back during the day and realized it wasn't random. The pattern wasn't musical, but rhythmic, almost like Morse code. I Googled Morse code translators and tried punching in the rhythm. The closest phrase I could get from the patterns was, "Don't come up." That sent a chill down my spine. A few days later, I went upstairs to knock on Bill's door. I just wanted to ask about the knocking, maybe even let him know how loud it was. I didn't get to. As I stood outside his door, I heard him talking. Not to me, but to someone. "No, not yet." "He doesn't know." I backed away fast. From then on, I started sleeping in my living room. I tried drowning out the knocking with a fan or white noise. Nothing worked. The knocks weren't just sounds. They were invasive, as if whoever was doing it wanted to break through more than just wood and drywall. Then, one night, I heard dragging noises. Heavy, slow. Something is being pulled across the floor above me. Then a single, loud thud. Then silence. The next morning, I saw the landlord in the parking lot. I mentioned the sounds. "Hey, do you know if Bill's okay? I've heard some strange noises, like someone moving furniture or something heavy." The landlord looked confused. "Bill? Bill moved out last month." I blinked. "What?" "No, I talked to him. I've been hearing him walking around every night." He shook his head. "His lease ended at the end of August. Left the key in the drop box. The place is empty." I walked back to my apartment in a daze. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited in my living room, lights off, just watching the ceiling. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking started again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. But this time, something changed. I stepped outside my unit and tiptoed up the creaky stairs. When I reached apartment 3B, Bill's old place, the knocking was still going. I pressed my ear to the door. It was louder now, like it was coming from the floor itself. The next morning, I dragged the landlord back. He was skeptical, annoyed even. But when he opened the door, he froze. The place was empty. No furniture. Dust coating the floor. But on the far wall, above where my bed would have been downstairs, the drywall was chipped, as if someone had punched or scratched at it over and over. Inside the shallow cavity, we found 2 things: an old, scratched wristwatch, and a folded, yellowed piece of paper. The paper read, in shaky handwriting, "If you hear the knocking, do not respond." The landlord was visibly shaken. He insisted only he had access to the keys. I asked if anyone had died in the apartment. He said, "Not to my knowledge," but his voice had lost its certainty. That night, I moved my mattress into the living room. I left the lights on. I kept checking the time. At 3:17, the knock returned, but not from above. It came from my closet. 3 knocks. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. No answer. I called 911, but the knocking kept going. Slow, deliberate, now louder. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Why didn't you answer?" I ran out of the apartment without looking back. I drove to an all-night diner and sat there until sunrise. The next morning, I returned with the landlord. We found nothing in the closet, but the inside of the door had deep scratches, like fingernails had raked it from the inside. I packed my things and left. I moved in with a coworker temporarily while looking for something new. But it didn't stop there. A week after I left, I received a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was static for a few seconds, then a faint whisper, "Don't leave the door open." I deleted it. A few weeks later, I drove past the old place. Just curiosity. Just to prove to myself it was real. The lights were on. Someone had moved in. I was about to drive off when I looked up at the 3rd floor window. Someone was standing there, still, watching. Face pale, hands resting on the sill. And then I realized, it wasn't Bill. It wasn't anyone I'd ever seen. Just a shape watching from a place that should have been empty. Now, whenever I hear a knock late at night, whether it's at my door or from the apartment next door, I freeze. I never answer. I never go to investigate, and I always check my closet before bed. Before we dive into the next story, if you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Your support truly encourages us and helps this channel continue to grow. And don't forget to share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. When I moved into Redwood Pines, I thought I had found peace. The apartment complex was clean, modern, and tucked just far enough from the city to be quiet, but close enough to still feel alive. I was in my early 30s, working remotely after leaving a job I hated, and just needed solitude to reset. Unit 6C was mine. Top floor, decent view, no immediate neighbors on one side. The unit next to me, 6B, had apparently been vacant for a while. Or so I was told. My first week there was uneventful. The staff was nice, the other tenants kept to themselves, and the building was almost unnaturally quiet at night. But sometime during the second week, I started noticing odd things about Unit 6B. It started with the smell. Not constant, but sudden bursts of chemical cleaner. The kind of sterile, sharp scent that burns your nose. It would seep through the shared wall, always at night, and always gone by morning. I asked maintenance, and they told me the unit was still empty, still being prepped for leasing. Then the light started flickering under the door. Faint, almost like someone was walking around with a flashlight. I figured maybe a cleaning crew had started working odd hours. One night, around 3 a.m., I was woken by a sharp, mechanical sound, like something being dragged across metal. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. But the next morning, there were strange scrapes on the floor near my front door. Long, curved lines, as if someone had dragged something heavy right outside. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I waited until evening, then took the stairs down to the leasing office. I asked again if anyone had moved into 6B. "Still vacant," the receptionist said. We haven't shown it to anyone yet." I wanted to press, but something about the look she gave me made me stop. That night, I stayed up, watching through the peephole. Around 1:47 a.m., I saw movement. A man, mid-40s maybe, wearing gloves and a dark coat, exiting Unit 6B with a large black trash bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't use the elevator. He took the stairs. I followed the next day, checking the dumpsters. Nothing. No black bags. Nothing unusual at all. That's when the dreams started. I'd wake up in sweat, convinced someone had been standing at the foot of my bed. My apartment was locked, always, but I began finding small things moved. A cup out of place, a drawer left half open. I started stacking pennies on my doorknob each night. Twice, I woke up and found them scattered on the floor. I tried telling a neighbor once, a woman from 5C. She looked at me like I was describing a fever dream. Then she said something I still can't explain. I used to live in 6B. I blinked. What? They said no one. She shook her head. Just be careful at night. If you hear the knocking, don't answer. I didn't sleep at all that night. A few days later, I heard the knocking. 3 sharp knocks. No more, no less. They came from the shared wall between my unit and Unit 6B. I sat frozen for what felt like an hour. Then they came again. 3 more. No footsteps. No voices. I called the leasing office the next morning. The receptionist was different this time. When I asked about 6B again, she smiled a little too long and said, "There's no one scheduled to live there. It's sealed." That word stuck with me. Sealed. I started watching the hallway camera feed through a third-party app I installed. Days went by. Nothing. Then one night, at 2:33 a.m., I watched as the door to 6B opened on its own. No one entered. No one exited. But the door stayed open for nearly 3 minutes before slowly closing. That was the final straw. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, staring at my own door, trying to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone left it open by accident. Maybe there was a draft. Maybe I was just tired and reading too much into everything. But I knew better. I could feel it in my gut. The next morning, I started packing. That's when I heard the scraping again. But this time, it was clearer. Closer. It wasn't coming from 6B. It was coming from inside my own ceiling. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the beams. I stood still for almost 10 minutes, holding my breath, listening. It stopped as suddenly as it started. I didn't wait to figure it out. I took what I could carry and left. I filed a report with building management later that day. They were polite, professional, but I could tell they weren't taking me seriously. When I asked, again, about Unit 6B, they repeated what I'd already been told. Vacant, still under renovation, no authorized access. I mentioned the man I saw, the trash bag, the strange noises, the chemical smell. They said they'd look into it. A week later, I checked the building's website. The listing for 6B was gone, not marked as rented, just removed entirely. I haven't been back to Redwood Pines since, but occasionally I still get an email from them. Generic newsletters, holiday greetings, leasing promotions. I don't know why I'm still on their list. I unsubscribed 3 times. But what gets me is this. Last month, I got an envelope with no stamp, no return address, just my name, typed. That alone would have been strange. But what unsettled me most was the fact that it had arrived at my new apartment. I never told the building where I moved. I didn't forward any mail, didn't update my address with them. As far as I know, no one from Redwood Pines should have had any way of knowing where I went. Yet somehow, the envelope still found me. Inside was a flyer. Now leasing at Redwood Pines, Unit 6B, newly renovated, ready for immediate move-in. And on the bottom corner, barely visible unless you looked closely, a faint brown fingerprint. I threw the flyer away, told myself it was just a clerical mistake, a fluke. I didn't sleep well that night, not because of fear exactly, but because of that quiet, persistent question I couldn't shake. How did they find me? Since then, I've been trying to move on. I keep my blinds closed. I check the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. But most of all, I try not to think about Redwood Pines, Unit 6B. Still, every now and then, just before I fall asleep, I imagine I hear that familiar sound again. The slow, dragging scrape of something heavy on concrete. And when I do, I stay perfectly still. Because deep down, I'm scared if I move, they'll know where I am.